Hi, everybody. Welcome. Sorry it took us a couple extra minutes there. We had to get all beautiful for you. So we are here.
I wouldn't go that far.
So thanks for joining us today. So do you like to hike with your dog? Because if you do, you're going to want to stay tuned because we are going to talk about 6 first aid tips to keep your dog safe when hiking. So if you are joining us live today, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. If you're joining us on the replay, please say hello. So before we get started, I want to introduce the people you see here. So I am Tracy Bisson. I am the owner and founder of It Takes a Village Pet Care. We offer dog walking, vacation pet sitting services, and farm care in Barrington and surrounding communities. And I am here with my friend April Bagosh, who is the owner and founder of Healthy Pets in New Hampshire in Concord. And she is a certified canine fitness trainer and pet tech pet first aid CPR instructor. And she has actually trained all of my staff. She's the only one I'll use. She's awesome. So she's going to give us some great tips today. So what we're going to share is the 6 most common pet first aid situations you may encounter while out on the trail, as well as how to protect your dog. So the things that we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about insect bites, stings, and allergic reactions, poisons, toxins, and parasites, snake bites, exposure to extreme temperatures, extremity injuries, and wounds and trauma. So we welcome your questions. Feel free to post them as we're broadcasting. If for some reason we don't see your questions on the broadcast, we will get answers to you on the replay. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to April.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us, guys, because this is a really important topic, and we are in April. Not many of you don't know this, but April actually is National Pet First Aid Awareness Month. So that's one of the reasons why we decided today is a great time to do the topic, or this month, I should say, is a great time to do this topic. But also, Tracy just came back from a wonderful walk. You guys had a good, successful walk.
We did.
And, you guys are bringing your dogs out, and there's all sorts of things that can happen. I don't know if many of you have actually experienced things with your own dogs as you're out hiking and thought, most of the time things are just minor and they turn out okay. But when they happen, I think if you're like me, we go, God, that could have been so much worse. And then how do you manage it? And so today we're going to talk about the topics that Tracy mentioned earlier, the 6 of them. And she actually mentioned them in order of what we typically see as issues that people run into in this state, in this region. And the reason that I say that is because I do want you to be aware that if you are a person that travels with your animal and that you do long hikes or off trail hiking or whatnot in other parts of the country, one of the things to be aware of is, where are you? So before you set off on your hike, for yourself and for your animal, what's your environment? What might you be running into? So here in New Hampshire, we're lucky to not really have any kind of poisonous. We have some poisonous insects and some poisonous snakes, but they're not as abundant as they are in, like, let's say, Missouri. So here we'll address these things as far as like what's coming into vet clinics, what they're seeing, and then if not actually having to go into a vet clinic, what are you guys dealing with, and what do you do for sort of the pre-vet or at-home care, because you're on a trail and you can't just get to the vet quickly in most cases. So the first thing that Tracy talked about was insects, bites, stings, and allergic reactions. So I'm sure all of you have kind of witnessed your dogs off on the trail. Now, if they're on leash, obviously the best choice, and I think in a lot of places you're more familiar than I am, that they would require that dogs be on leash.
Absolutely. Most places do.
Okay. And that's obviously for the benefit of you and your dog, right? So there's a lot of reasons why you want your animals on leash. And in this case, on leash isn't necessarily going to prevent them from getting into an insect nest, let's say, or, getting an allergic reaction to something, basically because those things can be by many different forms. So when we talk about insect bites and stings, they're actually lumped into our section on the CPR class of poisonings. And that's because most of the time they are having a reaction that, whether it's an actual skull and crossbone poisoning or if it's like just a minor reaction, it's considered something that has been done by injection, ingestion. So injection would mean like an insect bite or sting. Ingestion means that they've taken something in, like our dogs loving the mushrooms that they see on the trails. They always get in the mushrooms. Inhalation, so it could be a situation of, depending upon where you are. So some of us are not actually hiking in the woods. We're actually walking through our towns and our cities. And inhalation can happen, a reaction to inhalation can happen because of, car fumes and all the city stuff that we get involved with for that reasons. And then also by absorption. So whether we are out on a trail that might be maintained, or even some non-maintained trails, there are things that end up out in our environment that we can't predict and we can't control that can actually get through the paw pads. Or if you have a dog like mine that loves to roll, then it's going to get in through their skin. So there's lots of ways, 4 in particular, that you're going to maybe run into something that's going to be a problem for your animal. For the most part, these are not issues for us because of where we live. But that being said, Tracy has wonderfully provided us with the pet first aid kit that she and her staff all have. That
all our team members carry.
Yep. So when they're out doing their pet sitting and dog walking and whatnot, or like she said, when you guys are joining her on the trail for the dog walks that she has monthly, she has this at least. And I'm not sure if your people help kind of come with you on the walk.
Not at the dog, but during the week when they're servicing customers, everybody carries one.
So that's one of the first things that we encourage if you're going to be doing a walk with your dog. A lot of people will strike off with nothing. And most of us are okay. That doesn't end up becoming an issue. But when you need something, you wish you had something. And this is like the perfect size. It is Adventure Medical Kits. And I think that's probably how you'd be able to look it up. And when you're looking up the pet first aid kit, you want to make sure that there are certain things in it. So this one for wound care actually has sterile gauze dressings. So, you can pick this stuff up individually. It tends to be a little bit more expensive when you're just walking into like Rite Aid or CVS or whatever and purchasing it on your own. Or you can get it into a kit that can be an affordable way of doing it because of bulk quantity purchases. So sterile gauze dressing, this happens to be a 3x3, which is what's actually in this kit. Why would this be important when we're talking about insect bites and stings? Because if you have an animal that has gotten, like, let's say, bit by a spider, it doesn't matter whether the spider is poisonous or if it's a non-poisonous, there's still going to be 2 what we would call puncture wounds. And whenever you have open access to the body, that allows bacteria to come in. And so the reason that you'd want to have a sterile dressing is because you may be doing something like a triple antibiotic, which most of us use for ourselves and actually is contained within this kit. It won't be in a tube form. They're going to usually have them in small packages. But if you're using a triple antibiotic, what are our dogs' first thing they're going to want to do? Lick it off, right? So you're going to want to have your gauze bandages to be able to apply over that so that they're not going to be tempted to lick it off and then therefore ultimately ingest something that's really not good for them. I mean, triple antibiotics are not meant for ingestion. So know that if you're going to be using this, it's wonderful for preventing bacterial infection. However, it's not something that you want them licking. So you're going to want to have your gauze pads. And I can't tell you, you cannot have enough gauze rolls in your pet first aid kit. Oh my God. Like, I use these things for virtually everything because it can become the thing that you wrap the gauze pad onto a limb or an appendage with. It also can become something that's an emergency muzzle. So if you run into a situation where you have an animal that is fearful or is in pain and you don't have a muzzle, because those are weird things that people don't necessarily carry with them on walks, gauze can become a muzzle. When I teach my classes, we actually do have something that we provide you all with, which is an emergency muzzle. It's literally a 72-inch piece of felt that's just cut up. And it's going to show you that, like, a drawstring or shoelaces or bandanas, which you all love to have with your dogs. This is something cool and fun that most people will put on their dogs. This actually becomes part of your pet first aid kit because of the number of uses that you can have with it. So gauze can become an emergency muzzle, but it also is the thing that you're going to wrap your gauze pad with on any kind of an injury, insect bite, or sting that actually produces introduction into the body. So when I say that, it's broken skin. If you have broken skin, there's always a potential for bacterial exposure. And so your 3 things are going to be your gauze pad, your triple antibiotic, and your gauze roll. And then, because we're dealing with animals, especially dogs in particular, there is no self-respecting dog out there that is going to let a bandage down its leg. So we encourage you to have, and that's not necessarily something that's going to come in a pet first aid kit if you purchase it already pre-made, but we encourage you to have what we call vet wrap. Humans, it's called Coflex, if you ever wonder what that stuff is. So this is an adhesive, stretchy, sticks to itself material that you would wrap around a bandage. Like, so if you did a gauze pad and a gauze roll, the final stage is going to be this vet wrap, because when they go to chew it, it actually will tighten around the wound, and they can't chew through this and shred it as quickly as they can chew through gauze. And so this is why we encourage you to have that in your pet first aid kit.
Well, I wonder what this has. Elastic bandage, self-adhering?
Could be. And what is this? So 2-inch. So I'm not sure if that's the width or what. We have to open that up to
Probably
see
the
exactly
width,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
But yeah, that could be it. So anything that sticks to itself that the animal's not going to be able to sort of easily chew through or rip off, which is why we use vet wrap. And this, if you talk to your vets about this kind of stuff, they're going to say vet wrap. This is what they're going to use. And this is what they would use if you went into your vet's office.
Excellent.
Yeah. So other than the potential for bacteria exposure because of a bite or a sting, the other thing that we really want you guys to be careful of is an allergic reaction. So some animals are going to have an adverse and a very severe allergic reaction to an insect bite or a sting. What that is called, the response that they're getting is something called anaphylaxis or anaphylactic shock. So what happens in anaphylactic shock is that it's a histamine response in the body. The immune system says, like danger, danger. So we have to fight this foreign invader. And the way that it does it is by creating massive inflammation throughout the body. And in particular, the throat and the mouth and head area. Now, the reason mostly for that is because our dogs and cats are going to get it in the stuff face first. Like when they go to explore something, it's with all of this stuff, right? Yeah. So that's where they're going to get it first. So when you are looking for potential insect bites or stings, because sometimes you have an animal that's going to have a reaction and you're not quite sure what they're reacting to, but if they're itching or if they're licking or biting at an area incessantly and it's an area that they don't normally pay attention to, bring your attention to it. Because something's going on there that's not normal for them. And that's when if you part the fur and you get down to the skin level, what you ultimately may see is those toe puncture wounds, right? Or something like a scrape or whatever, something that you wouldn't have seen through the fur. That's going to, number one, give you an indication of, okay, so I have open wound that allows potential bacteria exposure. And then also that you could potentially have a situation where they're going to go into anaphylactic shock. Anaphylactic shock does tend to come on pretty quickly. The good news, if there's good news about anaphylactic shock, is that it is a histamine response, meaning it's an allergic reaction. So if you keep Benadryl, which is the brand name, but what this is diphenhydramine. So if you guys are, you don't do this necessarily with brand names, diphenhydramine, 25 milligrams is what you're going to find in this Benadryl. I'm accentuating that because many of us now buy these combo products. So you're going to have Benadryl, sinus, and cold. That is not straight diphenhydramine. That will be dangerous for your animals. So you need to look at the back. Make sure when it says Benadryl allergy, it doesn't say for cold. It doesn't say for sinus. It says for allergy. They come in multiple forms. So the one I'm holding here in my left hand is actually the tablet form, which most of us that's usually what we keep. It's the easiest way for all of us to take it. It could be the easiest way to give it to your animals, depending upon how well they pill. Stick it in peanut butter, cheese, whatever you got to do. There's ways that they will take this. Some animals are like, just give it to me and I'll take it right away. What you need to know about these is that they are 25 milligram pills, and you will see that on the back, because you do want to be aware of the dosage of Benadryl that you're using for your animals, and it's based on body weight. Now, when I tell you the formula, what I also want you to realize is that I need you to have a conversation with your vet about this. Okay, just because we're telling you what the safe dosage is, we prefer that all of these conversations happen with your vet prior to having something happen or prior to using the Benadryl or the peroxide or whatever, because you need to be on the same page. If you're going to be doing some self-care prior to bringing them into the vet, they need to know what you did. You need to know what you did. So what you will find is that the normal recommended dosage, safe dosage for dogs to do for Benadryl is 1 to 2 milligrams per pound of body weight. Okay, so just write that down, keep that in your mind, but discuss it with your vet, because some of you, if you think about that, if I have an 80-pound dog and I have 2 milligrams, right, that's going to come up as the safe dosage, I could literally be giving him 160 milligrams. So if you do quick math out there, which I don't know how good you guys are at math because I'm not great, but you're looking at close to 7 Benadryl pills.
Oh, wow.
Right, that's a lot of Benadryl to be safe for an 80-pound dog.
So 1 to 2 milligrams per pound of body weight for the Benadryl.
For the Benadryl.
All right, I'm going to just post that here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing about anaphylactic shock. I just told you that the tissues of the throat swell, right? So how are you going to get a pill down?
Right.
Right. So this is why we have something called blister packs or gel. So it's actually called allergy liquid gels. Okay, and so if I pull this out, and I don't know how well you guys will be able to see this, but they are little capsules, right, that are filled with a gel. So these are, always keep your pills because those are the most convenient. These here you always want to keep in your pet first aid kit at home, but especially when you're on a hike, because they're liquid, which means that when you don't have a throat that tissue is allowing something solid to go down, you can actually use this sublingually.
Okay.
Pop it open with like if you have a pin, or they would recommend that you just tape a safety pin to the back of this so that you can pop it right open and squeeze it down under their tongue and get it into their system quickly so that it can start working on that histamine.
And so that versus the liquid, would this be a quicker fix?
Well, so no, not necessarily. But the problem that I have with the liquid, now this is infant.
Okay.
This is infant Benadryl. The liquid is made for infants. These are still 25 milligram capsules, whereas when you get a dosage, the prescribed dosage of the liquid, it's 12.5. So it's cut in half for an infant or a child.
Okay.
The other thing, the problem with this is that, these are pre-packaged.
Right.
Like you just pop it open and you get the amount that you want based on how many you give. This is liquid, right? There is this nice little cup here, but I don't know how many of you have ever tried to do a shot with your dog.
Open up and let me pour it in your mouth, doggy.
they don't do that. So that's fine if you want to use this. The other problem that I have with this, and I'm not saying that it's a problem, but they do flavor this so that it can be more palatable for children.
Yep.
And it's a cherry flavor, which means that there's a certain amount of sugar and there's synthetic kind of stuff in here, which it's not synthetic to begin with, but the less synthetic things you introduce into your dog, the better. So if you're going to keep the liquid because to you it's easier than fumbling around with a gel pack or a blister pack, then you're going to want to make sure, and again, not sure how well you'll be able to see this, but you're going to want to make sure that you keep varying sizes of needleless syringes in your pet first aid kit so that you can literally look at the measure that's on the side of the syringe, and then you suck up the amount that you need, and then you can actually just squirt it right down under their tongue or kind of in between their cheek and gum to get that down in there. And they will tell you like the increments of the measurement. So like this one only goes in, no, this one actually does milliliters, but it'll also show you where like a half a teaspoon is.
Okay.
So like we don't like the metric system. We just still are fighting it, right? So if teaspoon or tablespoon or whatever works better for you, you'll actually find that it's going to tell you 3/4 teaspoon, 1 teaspoon, 1/4 teaspoon. And so if you keep these based on the size of your dog, then you're going to be better off because you'll be able to take in the amount that you want, knowing that your dosage is whatever it might be for your dog's weight. That's what you're going to suck up. That's what you're going to shoot in. Okay, so this is why these are critical.
And would you recommend this would probably be better to carry if you have a small breed dog, since this would probably be too much for them?
Well, it won't be too much. I mean, if you have a super, like I had a 4-pound Yorkie that used to sometimes.
Well, we saw a mini Chihuahua today. It was the smallest thing I've ever seen.
Teeniest, tiniest.
Yeah.
So in that case, if you're having, if it's not anaphylactic shock, and you just need to do something for an allergic response, you could cut these into 4 pieces and still sort of figure out. It's not super, super accurate. So yeah. I mean, personally, if I could avoid this, I would try to avoid it only because of the flavoring. Right?
Okay.
It just adds that much more that your dog
And you
could
probably
potentially
can't get that
react
in
to.
a generic flavor?
I have never.
flavored?
They used to, and I couldn't find one when I was looking for it. I actually purchased this just for this class because I don't actually usually keep the liquid because I'm fine with my dogs to do either way of the blister pack or the pills.
Interesting.
But yeah, I mean, this is why it's so critical. And we actually had a conversation before we went live about pet first aid kits and you guys making your own. It's great to buy the prepackaged, but if you're going to buy the prepackaged, this one actually lists on the back of it everything that's in there. When I think about a pet first aid kit, you have to realize that it has to be appropriate for the animal in question. So if this little mini Chihuahua that was on the walk with you today was put next to my 80-pound mix, they're not going to use the same size stuff. I mean, this would literally cover that poor dog's body, right? Exactly. Versus like just one thigh of my dog, right? So if you make your own pet first aid kit, you can customize it.
Yeah,
that's really kind of the way to go.
Or you can always buy something like this as a base and maybe add special stuff to it depending on your breed.
Absolutely. So you get like the basic kit that has the majority of the stuff that you want in it, right? And then you add to it, or you replace based on the size animal that you have, right? So you can just do that kind of thing. Excellent. But another reason why I think it's so critical to do build your own pet first aid kit is because then you know what's in it. Yep. And then guys, when you use something, you have to replace it, right? Because just because, oh great, I used my gauze and now you go out the next time and you didn't replace it and you don't have it. So it's really critical that you're making sure that you're keeping these things up to date. All right, so that was insect bites, stings, and allergic reactions. And if you guys have questions, send them our way. I know it's kind of a lot of information in a short amount of time, but we do have other topics we want to get to because all of us that have hiked with our dogs have run into something. Mm-hmm. I have a dog that I swear he was brought to me because I teach this class, and he's done everything that he imaginable. But now I have to learn, how do I deal with this? All right, so poisons, toxins, and parasites. The great thing about this is that we kind of talked about poisons when we talked about insect bites and stings because they're referred to within our first aid workshop as a poison. Okay, so poison, if it's a legit poison, now when I say that, for an allergic reaction to an insect bite or sting, you're absolutely going to call the vet. You're absolutely going to make a trip to the vet. But it's not treated the same way as a poison like a chemical or even some like poisonous foods that they might get into, the mushrooms, or they just, for whatever reason, they're the dog that has that oral fixation and they eat every plant in sight, right? So that's not necessarily going to be treated the same way. So for true poisonings, the very first thing that you do, and I know this can be challenging if you're out on the trail because you don't necessarily have cell coverage. Hopefully we're someplace with cell coverage. But the very, very first thing that you do in any suspected poisoning is to call a poison control hotline, a pet poison control hotline. And when I say a, it's because several exist out there. But what I can give you, and if you want to post this there, what I can give you is the number for the ASPCA poison control hotline. And they make it really easy. It's 888-426-4435, which if you wanted to put that into numbers, it becomes 888, the number 4, and then ANA HELP, like the first 3 letters of animal, ANI, HELP, HELP. And that will give you the poison control hotline number for ASPCA poison control.
So 888-426-4435?
426-4435, yep, that's
Perfect.
it.
All right.
Okay. Now, the reason that I'm stressing that so much is because oftentimes the first person that people call is their vet. And unfortunately, what happens is the vet's going to say, did you call poison control? And now you've wasted valuable time. Right. And so you want to make sure that the first phone call that you make is to a poison control hotline.
Should we mention, too, that there's a fee involved with that, just so people are aware?
We probably should have mentioned that there is a fee involved with that, and especially if you're hiking, because I don't know how many of us carry credit cards when we're hiking.
Right.
But, honestly, this day and age, you should probably carry a debit or credit card all the time just because of the things that we can get into.
Yeah.
So, yes, there is a charge for that. Don't get mad. These people have to be trained.
Right.
They have to know chemicals. They have to know veterinary medicine. There's a reason why that there's a charge for that, and believe me, you're going to pay it. But generally speaking, one of the things, and why would you suspect a poison? Outside of seeing that they ingested something, why would you suspect a poison? It would be based on symptoms. So you're going to be looking at symptoms like vomiting and diarrhea, which are sort of physiological. So vomiting, diarrhea, excess salivation, they'll be foaming at the mouth kind of thing, or just heavy drooling, even if it's not necessarily foaming. When we get into some more of the sort of neurological responses from a poison, like a neurotoxin, then you're going to be talking about like they could be confused, they could have limited control of their body movements, they could lose consciousness. Any number of things could happen to a pet that's been poisoned. But one of the things that is a universal for poisoning that the poison control hotline is going to encourage, if it's appropriate, and please understand, if appropriate, because there are poisonings, and most of us know that we keep hydrogen peroxide in a pet first aid kit or someplace close. Her kit actually does have small pouches. I think it was a 1 ounce hydrogen peroxide 1 ounce packet,
Yep.
right? That's
Yep.
awesome. Because a lot of them don't. Because they don't, how do you package?
Right.
So it's the straight 3% hydrogen peroxide like what you're seeing in this brown bottle. The reason that I say make sure you have this is because most of the time if there's an ingestion poisoning, poison control hotline is going to say, have they started vomiting or having diarrhea? And if they have not, or if they have, fine, but if they have not, most cases are going to encourage vomiting by administration of hydrogen peroxide. Right. But it's not always the case. They don't always want it coming back up. So you do need to be sure that you're not doing this unless you're told by poison control or by your vet. Okay. And again, there is a pre-measured dosage. Harder to do with hydrogen peroxide, which is why I, again, encourage you to have your needleless syringes. If you're going to have a bottle like this versus a pre-measured packet like what she has in her kit, then you're going to want to make sure you have your syringe so that you can kind of suck it up and put it right down. Okay, so it's usually 1 tablespoon to every 15 pounds of body weight. It's approximate. But again, that's another conversation that you're going to have with your vet.
Okay, so again, only administer this when your vet tells you how much and if they say it's okay.
Yeah, from an oral standpoint for poisoning.
Okay.
Absolutely. Now, using hydrogen peroxide on a cut or a scrape or whatever, just the same rules apply to us. But, you don't use it regular. Yep. It's a one-shot deal. If you keep using it, actually can cause tissue damage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is not something that you want to continue to apply. This is a clean it all out and then other stuff happens after the fact. But from an oral poisoning standpoint, only if said to do so by vet or poison control hotline.
Okay.
And you might want to keep this syringe. Okay. Parasites. So those are things like the ticks, and let's talk about the ticks and things first. Ticks and fleas.
Do we have to?
I know, right? We have to. I wish we didn't, but we have to already. I don't know about you, but I plucked them off of myself and my dog.
They're out already. Yep.
So ticks. I mean, it's a tick, right? I think we all know about ticks. I mean, we know that from a first aid standpoint, for what I can tell you today, the extent of it is pretty much just you're going to have to do an all-over check. If you use, whatever your choice is, if you use a topical, like the Canine Advantix or the, what's the other one?
Seresto collars?
It is Seresto collars.
We still use Frontline.
Frontline, yeah, I can always forget that one. Or you're doing an oral, so they've got the NexGard and they have Bravecto and those kinds of things. Whatever your choice is, that's something that you discuss with your vet, right? So your choice is yours. There are a lot of people, like myself, I don't choose to use a topical or an oral because I have a dog that has always had a reaction to them. It doesn't matter what form. And please do not, I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm not saying don't do them. I'm just saying you have to discuss things with your vet. And my vet just happened to say, hey, if you're going to have a reaction every time, let's just not do it. Because they can be as bad as seizures sometimes.
Wow.
And that's not common. That is the tiniest percentage. So I am not telling you not to use these things. But if you're not going to do that, then the best and only real thing that you can do is to, every time you stop, so like let's say that you're doing a long hike, every time you stop, you have lunch, you go to a water source or whatever it might be, do something called the snout to tail. We call it the snout to tail. Pet Tech has actually trademarked this procedure. It's a technique. And it's literally hands on your dog or your cat from their snout all the way to their tail, looking for, feeling for, smelling for, listening for, all things that could give you an indication of what's going on with your animal. But in the case of ticks, in my house, it's called tick check. And it's literally, we come in from the outside, and I have a little Jack Russell, and when I say tick check, he goes running to the bedroom, up on the bed, and he just sits and waits. Because it's tick check and canine massage in my household.
Well, he's going to get a treat after, right?
Well, he's going to get a massage on top of a treat. But the whole massage in itself, because I'm literally parting the fur, I'm looking down to every level. This is not foolproof, guys, because if you have a dog that has a massive undercoat, those ticks are going to get in there and you're not going to find them until they blow up.
Yep.
Right? So, but it is still something, I mean, and I don't care whether they are on something, they're still going to be at a surface level. Those ticks are going to be there, so you might as well get them gone before they even think about biting.
Right? Do you know that there is only one way to kill a tick? You can't flush them. They come back.
No, I know they do. They survived my washing machine.
You have to put them in alcohol.
Yeah. Okay. So alcohol.
Can't burn them with a match.
No.
It's not. No. It's full. The only foolproof thing is putting them in alcohol. Have them in a little container.
Okay.
Put them in. Kill them.
So
it's my tick collection.
No, I was just going to say no reason why you can't bring some alcohol in your pet first aid kit. Little container, plop it in there, and when you get them, drop them down. Because God, you don't want to flick them off the trail for the next dog that comes around, right?
Well, and I'm wondering, is there any benefit in keeping them if your dog has?
Yeah. So when you have had a tick that's actually bit, it doesn't have to be embedded, although embedded generally is the time when they're going to kind of release the bacteria.
Okay.
But if you have had to actually physically remove the tick from your animal, it is a good idea to save it because you may have to test it to see if in fact there was Lyme or any of the other nasty bacteria that were present within that tick. So yeah, I mean, nobody loves the idea of it, but even with a spider bite, an insect bite, if you know what it is that bit and you can save it.
Yeah, I've heard that with snakes, yeah.
Absolutely with snakes. I mean, not many people want to grab a snake and take it with them, but you know what I mean? So absolutely. And good point, by the way, because when we talked about insect bites and stings, that actually is, snakes are lumped into that same category. And again, we only have 2 poisonous snake species in the state. I always encourage you guys, before you go out on a hike, just go onto a Fish and Game website and plug in poisonous species of snakes or poisonous species of spiders in their website. And then they're going to come back with what's in your region.
That's a great idea.
Oh, you have to do it because you never know, and things are always changing. But with a snake bite, you're treating it. Snake bites, by the way, guys, always seen by a vet. There is no question about that. when you can get them to a vet as quickly as you can, they're going to be seen, even if it's poisonous or not, because there's a very, very high risk of bacterial exposure from the fangs of snake based on what they eat. And so you absolutely have to make sure that you're going to get them to the vet. But prior to that, you can clean with hydrogen peroxide. You can use a triple antibiotic. You can bandage, as we talked about earlier. And then you are minimizing the activity as much as possible, because whatever is going to go through the system has to go through the bloodstream. So if we minimize their activity, then that's going to lower their blood circulation, and therefore not spread it throughout the body as quickly.
In April, we have a couple of good tips here from listeners. So we've got Stacy says, I use an old pill bottle with cotton balls soaked in alcohol and tweezers with us. That's perfect.
Yep.
And then Bonnie says, carry the alcohol in a small pill bottle for ticks.
Yes.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And thank you guys both for mentioning tweezers. Tweezers should always be in your pet first aid kit, because those things are impossible, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing that I swear I would never be without these things, I don't care where, like you see me holding them right now, hemostats, right? So if you don't know what hemostats are, look it up. It's hard for me to show you because we're kind of so far away here, but they look like scissors. They have a shorter, they're not designed for cutting. They're designed for grabbing and not letting go.
Okay.
Right? And so the way that happens is right here, there's this little clip that if I tried to pull this open right now,
okay,
and she can vouch that I'm really pulling here, right? They're not going to open. But if I put my fingers back in there, what I do is I create I kind of take my thumb and I put pressure upward.
Okay.
There's a little clip here that you may or may not be able to see, that snaps shut. You probably heard it. When you give that little bit of pressure, it releases the end here, and therefore releases whatever it is that you're trying to hold on to. Oh, that's great. Right? Which I love these things. They're a little more challenging for ticks because they squeeze it.
Okay.
Right? So the what are they called? Tweezers. The tweezers I can get right to the base and pluck out all the time. These things are something that I would use, like if I'm trying to grab something, like let's say that they have something lodged in their throat and I want to grab it and pull it. Or I've used these for porcupine quills because, if you can't get to the vet right away, you got to get those things out, especially when they're on the paws. So hemostats, once you grab it, it's not letting go until you tell it to let go.
That looks like a great tool to me, but just something you said that we should probably just add a little disclaimer to. If you're taking something lodged out of a throat. That's like kid gloves right there. So I just wanted you to touch upon that.
That wasn't something that happens generally on the trail. That's why, it's always, you be careful what you say because you have to start talking about it. That's choking. That's a choking episode. However, it can happen on the trail.
Right.
Because they're going to get into stuff that it is not supposed to go down the way it does. Another topic in itself, maybe for another day, right? But yeah, absolutely. So something that's lodged in the throat, ideally, instead of trying to go in there and grab it, you're actually trying to do what we call the modified doggy Heimlich. So we're actually trying to expel it. We're trying to use pressure from inside out to get that object to actually either go down or get out with air pressure force.
Okay.
But there are instances in which if you can see an object in the throat, it is acceptable to attempt a finger scoop or, in that case, a pluck. Right, so finger scoop means that you can actually get alongside of the object in wherever it's stuck and get your fingers behind it and underneath it so you can pop it out. But that isn't, it's challenging, and it isn't always the most successful way of going about something. So, it is acceptable because the difference between not breathing or breathing, if it means you have to go and grab something. Right. This, again, hemostats, you got to be careful with anything, but tweezers, hemostats, they even have gone so far as to say you can put pliers in your pet first aid kit depending upon the size of your dog. The only thing is I've found that these are the only thing that won't let go.
Yep.
Right, so if you try to actually get something and you don't want it to stay and you really want to be able to grab it, the hemostats are my best friend.
Makes sense.
Love it for everything.
Right, excellent.
Okay.
Let's see if we have any questions here.
Yeah, please.
So Stacy says, thank you for mentioning the minimal use of hydrogen peroxide. It can cause tissue damage. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I work at a vet, and we offer free tick scoopers as well. Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, and actually I'm noticing a lot of places, and that is very cool. Yeah. So there's a bunch of different names for them, but they really are the most effective. If you've never seen a tick scoop, look it up. Find out. Tick twist and tick scoop, and they come by all sorts of different names. But the great thing about it is that it's this little teeny tiny slit in some, whether it be a plastic spoon looking kind of thing or whatever, and it gets at the very, very base, and if you just pull upwards, it's going to actually pull them right out. Because most cases when you're doing it with tweezers, if you don't have the technique down, you pull the body off, the head stays in.
Exactly.
And now all of a sudden we've got
And now it's microscopic and you can't see it without your glasses.
And it's still in there. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times it can form this big welt, and then and it's still doing its thing, even though the body's detached. It's still injecting its stuff. So not necessarily something we want to do. Okay. Snake bites. So again, guys, snake bites always seen by a vet, but they're going to be treated like a wound because the only thing you can do is triage, essentially take care of it on the trail and then get them to the vet. How are we doing on time?
We are over, but
okay.
I think this is more of an hour topic because we've got a lot of good stuff to share. So let's keep going.
Okay, well, and I can make it brief because the next ones are actually less likely to happen other than the one I'm just about to talk about.
Okay.
And that is exposure to extreme temperatures. So most of us kind of don't really do the long hikes in the winter, but there are those diehards out there that are going to do the long hikes in the winter.
Yep.
And if you have animals that are fine with that kind of thing, it's totally fine, right? However, so the exposure, understand that it is because of exposure for prolonged periods of time. You have to know your animal. So the little Chihuahua is not probably going to go out in the winter for more than 2 minutes, long enough to pee and come back in.
That's right.
Kind of thing. But some of the other dogs, I have a dog that literally will go off and he comes back with icicles hanging off his jowls and he's like, it's all good, right? So it depends on the animal that you have. Here's the thing about the extreme temperature exposure. I think the most common mistake that people make is we want to reverse the extreme temperature in either direction as quickly as you possibly can. Bad idea, right? So if you are cooling down too quickly, you can put the animal into shock. You can actually cause some negative cardiological responses. And so that is not something we want to do. My biggest pet peeve, when you read something about cooling an animal down, so if they go into hyper, meaning an overheated state or heat stroke, they'll often say bathe them in cool water. I don't like the way that's worded because to most people, you're going to be like, okay, I'm just going to run them to the pond and submerge them. That's too quick.
Okay.
Right. So what you are going to do is take off an article of your own clothing, or if you've kept towels or blankets or something in your pet first aid kit or anything that you have access to, which is usually an article of your own clothing, you're going to soak that in whatever water supply you have, right? And then you're going to, kind of wring it out a little bit. It doesn't have to be fully wrung, but you have to monitor that temperature. If it feels cold to the touch to you, it is too cold to put on them right away, and it certainly is too cold to submerge them.
Interesting.
Because too quick, like I said, is going to cause negative responses from what we want. So I always will take the towels or the article of clothing, submerge it, get it to the point where it's cool, but it's not cold to me. And then I actually drape it between the front legs and the back legs. If they're standing, you're going to have to drape it kind of over the spine, but up underneath, because that's their core.
Yep.
Right. So if you're cooling their core or if you're warming their core, that's going to actually tend to the rest of the body will respond to the core temperature. Conversely, with a cold exposure, you absolutely don't want to warm them up too quickly. In fact, most of the time, when vets or if you go online or whatever, article you're reading, they're going to tell you that you don't want, most of the time they don't even tell you how to necessarily warm them back up because people try to do it too quickly, especially if they've fallen through the ice.
Yeah.
Right? So they're freezing, they're shaking, and your response is just warm them up as quickly as we can. From an organism standpoint, you do that and you will cause a cardiac event. This is why they don't want it warmed up too quickly. So, generally speaking, you're going to rub vigorously to create friction and heat. You're going to take your own body heat, hug them. You can take, I don't have an example of it here, but they're like space blankets, I call them. Like they're metallic, the mylar-looking blanket.
We carry one in our kit when we hike.
Yep, exactly. And what happens is you drape it. It looks like a Jiffy Pop. The top of a Jiffy Pop, right? Yeah. You drape it over them, and that actually is going to reflect any heat that they have in their body back into them. It's not the quickest way, but it tends to be the safest way. And the other thing is when I said rub vigorously, the other thing with the cold exposure that you want to be aware of is that there's something called frostnip, which is like a first-degree cold injury. And then there's frostbite. So the first degree means it's surface level. It's superficial. The third degree frostbite is a deeper level. And some frostbite can go full thickness of all layers of the skin.
Right.
If you have an area of frostbite on your animal's body and you're trying to warm them back up because they're also hypothermic, you do not want to rub the frostbitten area. If you do that, you're going to cause further tissue damage. So when in a frostbite situation, the tissue is already damaged. Depending upon the degree of frostbite, like 1, 2, 3, or 4, the first couple of levels, it can be salvaged, right? But if you get to like 3 and 4, depending upon how extensive and the sort of intensity of the damage, it's possible that tissue is not going to be, it can't be repaired, it can't be fixed, and it's going to always be an area of numbness. They won't grow their hair back. There might be some scarring, like discoloration from that. Frostbite always has to be seen by a vet. I don't care how small that spot is, it's going to be seen by a vet because it's nerve damage, it's tissue that's damaged, it's nerve tissue that's damaged. vets need to look at this to be able to properly address it and make sure that the animal gets back to 100% if that's possible for them.
And so most likely it would be their nose or their feet,
it's
right?
always the exposed areas. Not to say that it couldn't be other areas, because like if their fur gets wet and then it goes down and absorbs. But yeah, nose, tips of the ears, paws, tails, exposed.
Depending on how much fur the
animal has.
Well, like for instance, on the dogs, when we walk them, if it is a cold day, if it's extreme cold, we don't walk them.
Yeah.
But we have a musher's wax that we put to protect their feet. Do you recommend?
Yep, absolutely.
Anything
So musher's
else,
wax is a great. It protects against a lot of things other than just cold.
Right, heat too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, like if you're in the cities, like the salts and the road salts and the sands and what such, whatever that might be out there. But it's not obviously the be-all and end-all. I mean, it's going to create that protection mostly against the moisture that would happen to create that cold, but it isn't in the end, temperature is what it is.
Yeah, just be mindful of the conditions before you go out.
Exactly. So, so from the extreme temperature, I mean, certainly you guys can ask more questions that we can answer after the fact, but the bottom line is don't warm them up too quickly, don't cool them down too quickly. If there's frostbitten areas, do not rub it. Don't submerge them to try to cool them down, and don't also, by the way, submerge them in warm water to try to warm them back up. It's always best to do that drape that we talked about, because then you can control the temperature. And by the way, guys, in your pet first aid kits, you're going to keep digital thermometers. Right, so if you run into a situation where you have an overheated or a hypothermic animal, you're going to want to monitor their temperature, because you need to know whether you're making a difference by what you're doing. Digital is the most accurate, obviously, for us for reading it. And also, I know you don't like this, and I don't like it, rectally. Okay, because people want to try to use the ear. I mean, it's not that you can't take the temperature there. The problem is it's not consistent.
Accurate.
Yeah, accurate or consistent from one measurement to the next. So you want to use a digital rectal thermometer to be able to, monitor whatever's going on. And this isn't just for those heat injuries. This is for anything that could be like a prolonged illness that's going to elevate their temperature, that you're going to need to know where they're at, right? Because internal or like, I didn't mean internal, a high temperature versus a low temperature they can cause similar problems as well. I mean, either one of them is not a good thing. So you want to make sure you know what you're dealing with.
Well, here's a question for you too, April. This is actually my husband, and he brings up a good question. Ray says, our dog doesn't like to drink water while hiking, specifically around other dogs. I guess she's not a social drinker.
Love it.
So how can we keep her hydrated, or is it just we should just be mindful of not taking her on really hot days?
Yeah, so if she's one that isn't going to drink, then you're mindful of not taking her on hot days. And actually, it's a good question. Thank you for bringing that up, because in the case of like an overheated dog, they probably aren't going to want to drink. And that is our typical response, is to want to give them something to drink.
Right.
And it's not a bad thing, but you do monitor it. Like if they're okay with the idea that they're drinking, that you're not going to let them have a free-for-all. Like you have to monitor how much is going in. The other thing, too, is that you're going to walk them to the lake or to the river. Again, what's the temperature of that? So if they start consuming like ice water, that isn't good either. That can cause a whole other slew of problems. So it's monitoring. It's watching symptoms and making your best judgment call. Okay, that's basically what it comes to.
Excellent.
Yeah, good question about that.
And Stacy has another great question. Body temperature roughly for dogs?
So this is for both dogs and cats. The normal average body temperature is between 100.4 and 102.5. So if your animal gets above 102.5, like 103 or higher, they are in heat stroke. If they get below, now the below is a little tricky, right? Here's why. So I just told you what that normal average is. Hypothermia can only be determined and called hypothermia when the dog or cat's body temperature is 4 degrees less than normal.
Okay.
So if my normal for my dog is 100.4, I can drop all the way to like 96.4 before they're hypothermic. If yours is 102.5, now we're going to 98 before we're like hypothermic. So this is, again, another reason why doing sort of what we call the snout to tail wellness assessment, which is, knowing their vitals. What's their normal height rate? What's their normal breathing rate? What's their body temperature? All of those things should be something that you can discuss with your vet. Like when you go into your vet's office, just ask them, hey.
Yeah, because they're taking temperature for you.
They're going to take the temperature. Now, I mean, obviously, to have an accurate reading, you kind of want to do it more than just the once a year or the twice a year that we're visiting our vets. Yep. But that can be a good indicator for you. If they're in a normal, healthy state, according to you and your vet, and their temperature comes out at a certain point, you could sort of safely say this is their normal.
To get that benchmark.
Just to have it, right? And write it in your first aid kit, because you're not necessarily going to remember it. Just write that stuff down so that you can say, well, what's their normal? Yep. Because, when you panic about something, you forget your own name.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Of course.
So body temperature of your dog. Yeah, exactly. Anything that's going to be helpful for you guys to remind yourself of certain things. And so... Extremity injuries. I mean, now we're getting into breaks, strains, fractures, things such as that. Your primary responsibility. I mean, this is one of the harder ones that we teach in the 6-hour class that you've taken, because, it's extensive. Like, for me to cover that right now, I'd literally have to have like a dog that we could actually, which we do have this one sitting. Prop wise, we don't necessarily have everything.
But you know what? People could give us feedback, and we could certainly do another show just based on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the most important, the critical thing that you want to keep in mind when you're talking about extremity injuries, obviously if it's just a strain, it is what it is. If it's a sprain, it is what it is. But when you're starting to talk about a dislocation in a joint, or you're talking about fractures, now in a simple fracture, you can't see it until an x-ray happens. In a compound fracture, unfortunately, you can see it. It's horrible. If you don't know what it is, look it up. Sit down, then look it up.
Prepare yourself.
Prepare yourself,
yeah.
Exactly. But for those things, your responsibility is to immobilize the limb in question and transport to the vet. There is nothing that you can do to fix these things, so it's an immobilization thing. Now, some of you are thinking, but I'm 3 miles out. Now what? Okay, so there are such things as dog stretchers, right? Because most of us are not taking our cats on a hike. Some people do, but cats are easier to handle because they're smaller.
Yeah.
You could literally take a cookie sheet in your backpack if you wanted, because you can put a cat on a cookie sheet.
Right.
Right? But so there's dog stretchers, so you can look them up online and find whatever's local to you. There are some great places where you can purchase that. For me, if I'm going way out, depending upon where I'm going and if this is going to work, a regular winter sled.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That is perfect because you can get them up onto it, and it actually has a handle where you can drag them out.
It's a great idea.
Right? So it's a little inconvenient, but I think if we're going to hike with our dogs, there's things that we're going to do that are going to be minorly inconvenient, like strapping it on your back. But it's kind of easy to work with that.
Well, it has so many other uses too. If you were to get trapped somewhere,
many other uses. I mean, it can be a shelter, and if you have to get across a body of water and float your pack across or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yep. And if you're a diehard hiker, then if you really want to be prepared. And here's
the thing: this is like the most basic of basic that we're discussing today.
Right.
If you're a diehard hiker, you're going to go for your advanced wilderness first aid for yourself and for your animals. You're going to just do that. Don't go out there without it.
Yep.
Yeah, and there are places. Unfortunately, the one place I used to refer to around here, they really haven't been offering it lately, and I'm not sure why, so I'm kind of out of a suggestion as to where to go. I'm working on it, trying to figure it out. If anybody out there knows advanced wilderness first aid for pets and for people, I know for people where we can find it, but the ones that include your pets, I don't know where it is out there now. I don't know.
Will you ever be offering it in the future, do you think?
Well, so Pet Tech is the company that I've trained under. And Pet Tech, because of who our audience is, we're not trying to train vets and we're not trying to train EMTs and professionals and whatnot.
Right.
So the advanced stuff, not to say that somebody's not going to go out there as a pet owner and learn it, but from a liability standpoint, I don't think it's something that Pet Tech will ever offer.
Oh, okay.
And as far as me, because I'm a Pet Tech instructor, if I was to offer it, it would be outside of the Pet Tech sort of name because of the liability that's attached to certain things. I mean, I've had people ask me before they came to my classes and they were mushers and they wanted to know how to stitch trailside.
Oh, jeez.
Not something that we cover, but actually something that you can learn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in that case, you'd want to.
Okay.
So that's why today was, your basics. I know sort of some of the stuff we like with the extremities, with the extremity injuries. Yeah, I can absolutely show you. And if you're interested in having like a video, hands-on, step-by-step of how to do this, we could have all the right props available, all the right prop dogs available as far as their legs. But it tends to be, it's a little bit more advanced. It's a little bit more involved. Right, so keep these things in mind. Stretchers, right? So because you want to just immobilize them. If you're talking about like a dislocation or you're talking about a compound fracture, you have to actually immobilize the joint or the bones, which you can literally do with sticks
and a bandana.
Right? Exactly.
Love those bandanas.
Or this even works. Your gauze works. Yep. Slip leads.
Okay,
slip leads can be an emergency muzzle if it needs to be. It can be the thing that you tie off because you're trying to immobilize something. So yeah, give us some feedback, guys. I mean, obviously, we've gone way over what we sort of thought we would.
Lots of good. Someone here says another suggestion for avid hikers is getting a pack of paw rescue harness. Are you familiar with what that is?
Paw rescue harness? Is that what it is?
Getting a pack of paw rescue harness.
Oh,
that's
okay.
A name brand?
So it must. Yeah, I was going to say Pack a Paw must be a name brand. I'm not 100% familiar with that, but rescue harness, I'm assuming it must be a way to transport?
Maybe.
So whoever just said that?
Yeah, feel free to post a link, Stacy, or give us some more information there.
Yeah.
Looks interesting.
Yeah, absolutely, because we're always looking for ways that we can easily get our dogs either on our backs
Yeah.
Because I mean, I've had people carry their dogs on their shoulders throughout out of the woods before because they had nothing else.
Yeah.
But there, some of us can.
Yep.
I mean, you get superhuman strength when you need to, but there are still. I mean, my mother's dog was hiking with us one time, and he got into a porcupine in a big bad way, and he had it all over his paws. And he's 45 pounds.
Oh wow! Yeah.
But he's like 45 pounds of like brick, dead weight. Like I could do 45 pounds no problem, but when I was trying to have Tim and get him out of the trail, like it didn't take long before I'm like, I cannot do this anymore. So yeah, I'd be curious to know what that is because I'm always looking for suggestions that we can offer people to take, especially when you're hiking.
Right.
A lot of people that are coming to me, this is stuff that's happening in their backyard.
Yes.
That's not what we're talking
that's a
about
good point.
today. Exactly. So.
Well, we've got 7 minutes that will be an hour. So,
oh my gosh.
So maybe we can cover the last one and then just tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Okay, fine. So wounds and trauma. This is another one where it's like, okay, you can do what you can do for triage and then you have to go to the vet. Because when we're talking about wounds and trauma, we're talking about puncture wounds. We're talking about like major bleeds, gashes, things such as that.
Cut on a rock or a sharp ledge or...
Yeah, and some of the stuff is just scrapes and abrasions. There's a big difference between scrapes and abrasions and an actual cut or a bleeding injury. So first of all, you need to know what your bleed injury is. And the way you can determine that is by the color of the blood, by the flow and the sort of how the blood acts as it's coming out of the body. So when you have a venous blood flow, it means that you've nicked a vein. Mm-hmm. Veins are farthest from the heart in the circulatory pathway. So they're going to be deoxygenated. The blood that's in that is going to be deoxygenated, which means that it's going to be like dark red or brown in color. Versus an arterial bleed that is going to be bright red because of the fact that it's fully oxygenated. It just left the heart to go to the rest of the organs and is carrying a lot of oxygen. So the color can help you sort of determine what kind of a bleed you have. And why does it matter? Because it's going to matter how quickly it's going to come out. So if we have an arterial bleed where you have something that is so close to the heart that every single time the heart beats, it's going to be spurting out of the injury site. Now, I'm not necessarily saying it's going to be like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's just that it's going to be pumping out. And so how quickly you need to determine to work with this to manage this bleed is going to be determined by what kind of a bleed you have. Okay. But the good news about that is that gauze pads, which you're going to have in your pet first aid kit, gauze rolls, and vet wrap are the way you're going to do this, right? And so you're literally going to find the area of the injury site. You're going to put your gauze pad on, and there's like multiple steps that you do. So elevation of the injury site, if it doesn't aggravate the injury, is always the first step that you're going to take. From elevation, we go to direct pressure. So the first thing we want to do is direct pressure over the injury site. And again, when we teach our classes, we assume worst case scenario, which means like nothing we do works. So direct pressure can be done on a series of three times for approximately 30 seconds. And if at the end of direct pressure application, you still see that there's blood coming up through your gauze pad, then we go into something called constricting hand or band. So your gauze rolls, your slip leads, your own hand, an emergency muzzle, anything that acts, sort of looks like gauze that can be long and can constrict, that can be tied, is going to be what you're going to do for your second protocol with the bleed. So once we go from direct pressure, constricting hand or band is it's acting like a tourniquet, but I caution, do not go out and buy a tourniquet because people are not properly trained to use tourniquets. They do it wrong and it makes things worse, right? So so basically with the constricting hand or band, the way this works on a limb is that so our front legs, our dog's front legs, back legs, and then tails all have an artery that feed them. So in other words, in order to get the blood flow to those limbs, there's a particular artery that will feed it. So on your animals, when they're standing upright, if you were in their front limbs were to kind of poke around where their armpit would be if they were us, right? And you find where that crease is, and then you go kind of like two fingers width down the inside of their front leg, there's something called the brachial artery. That brachial artery is going to feed the rest of that limb. So if you actually constrict it by actually squeezing it off, it will temporarily prevent the blood from actually exiting the wound. And so that's what we ultimately want to do is prevent it from exiting. So we don't want that blood loss. If it's a back limb, it's called the femoral artery. So you find it the same way, like where the leg attaches to the body, there's that crease. And you're going to kind of take like two fingers and kind of go down. The thing about this is if you're not actually, to locate these arteries is not as technical. You don't have to be as precise as if you were trying to actually find the pulse. You just need to be able to cover over it. So like if I say, about here on my arm is where I'm going to find my brachial artery, I don't care if I land on it. I just need to have enough coverage of whatever I'm using to constrict it. So if I took my entire hand or if I took a gauze roll or whatever and I just tied right off on that across where it would lay, it's going to do the trick. The point here is to try to minimize the amount of blood flow out of the body. So brachial artery found just south of the armpit if you're standing upright in your dog. Femoral artery, again, just south of where the crease of the leg is. And then for the tail, it's called the caudal artery. A little more challenging to find, but it's at the very, very, very base of the tail where the tail attaches to the body.
Okay.
Right. So you're cautious with this one because you go a little too low, and we got some issues now. But so you're going to push right at that spot, which will prevent blood from actually accessing the tail to prevent, any kind of major blood loss out of any of those injury sites. So those are great. You have that constricting hand or band for appendages or for limbs. But if you're talking about any other part of the body, the chest, the shoulder, the side, the hip, or whatever, certainly they're being fed by arteries, but there's no one artery that you can constrict easily to be able to prevent blood loss from that area, from that injury site. So just like we have these things called gauze pads, so this is a 3x3 there. I think they go up as much as 4x4 when they're called gauze pads. When they get bigger than that, they're called trauma pads. And they're literally like this. Sometimes they're a slightly different material, but like they can get to be, the size of this paper, right? And so you could cover a larger portion, like you could wrap it around an entire rib cage, and then wrap around with your gauze to prevent blood loss and also protect against bacterial exposure.
And again, if you have a large breed dog, you probably want some of those big ones.
Which is you're not going to find in a pet first aid kit. So this is why you have to customize your pet first aid kit according to what you have, right? Yep. So those kinds of things, if they're small enough, they can be treated like, hydrogen peroxide, triple antibiotic, and then wrap them. But if they're not, and there's a significant amount of blood flow, those techniques are kind of like just sort of a waste of time. You just need to do your direct pressure, your constriction, wrap them, and then transport to the vet. Puncture wounds, but not from a puncture wound standpoint, from an impaled object. This is critical for me to talk to you guys about. So an impaled object is something that's sticking out of the body.
Yep.
Like it usually is going to be our dog's chest, shoulder. Sometimes it's in random places, but for the purpose of you seeing, we've got something sticking out of the body. When you have an impaled object, don't remove it. So we're out on the trail and we're tempted to want to get it out. Don't. Most of the time, it's like a stick, which is great because if it is a stick, it can be cut.
Yep.
Right. And the reason I say that is if you have an object that's sticking out of the body this tall, which I don't know if you guys can see how high that is off my arm, the chances of it moving because of being knocked by something or the dog itself is very great.
Or the dog trying to chew it at me.
Chew it, exactly. So you never want to remove the impaled object. It's acting like a cork. It's keeping the blood in. It's keeping bacteria out. But you also need, and again, this is based on what situations you can run into in your pet first aid kit, you need to have something that if you could take a stick and you could trim it down to a manageable distance above the surface of the body. 1 inch is probably too short, 2 inches is probably appropriate, and the reason I say it's too short is you might lose it, right? So 2 inches is enough for you to still be able to see it, but you can contain the movement of that object. And so one of the ways that you would do that, if you want to give me your arm,
absolutely,
is we're going to pretend that she's stuck, right? And so if I've trimmed this down now to about where her fingers are, the next thing I want to do is minimize movement. So the way I'm going to do that is I have these gauze rolls anyway. Might as well use them. If I pack these at the very base of that object, and then I wrap a figure 8 wrap around it, it will prevent it from moving in any direction, which prevents it from doing further damage inside.
Excellent.
Right? So that's kind of how you want to manage a puncture wound. Puncture wounds absolutely, positively have to be seen by a vet. They heal in a funky way. A lot of times they're going to trap bacteria in the healing process, so they have to be seen by a vet, and they're seen pretty regularly once the vet's done their initial assessment. So that should cover kind of the majority of what you're going to run into in the trail. I know it's not everything, which brings me to, well, what do you do at that point? So Tracy has taken a class. I actually have a 6-hour CPR and first aid for pets class. About 2 hours of that is actually full-blown first aid with actually, you guys have some hands-on stuff. You practice with these things, show you actual props that you can use. The first part of it is the emergency protocols, which of course we didn't talk about today, CPR, rescue breathing, choking management. And so that's a course that I offer. You can go to my my Facebook page, which is Healthy Pets NH. That's where you're going to find a whole listing of all of the events or what my classes are.
Do you have them on your website as well, or just your Facebook page?
So my website will list it in a calendar. My website calendar doesn't allow as much information as the event page in a Facebook would.
So facebook.com/healthypetsnh?
Yes.
Is that, okay.
Yep, exactly. That's where you're going to see, first of all, that's going to give you a description, and it's going to give you a date and a time and a location, and it's going to give you the opportunity to click on a link to actually register for the class. Whereas my the calendar on my Facebook, I'm sorry, my website will have the classes listed in the calendar. I have built in the links, but the link is going to send you right to the Facebook page anyway.
Okay.
So you might as well just go to the Facebook page and save yourself some time.
All right, so I'm putting them both up here so people
Yep,
can
exactly.
have access to them.
Exactly. So yeah, so I mean, obviously you guys have a little smattering of what it is that I do as far as the classes that I offer. I'm a mobile classroom, so although she did mention that I'm based out of Concord, I go everywhere. I've gone to Maine and Vermont and Massachusetts and New Hampshire to teach these classes. CPR and first aid for pets is the primary classes that I offer, but I do offer a whole slew of other things, which you can certainly find on the website, outside of the more wellness-based type things. She mentioned also canine fitness training, which mentioning it this month is because it also happens to be National Canine Fitness Month, right? And so that's, again, stuff that you can get information you can get off my website if you want to learn more about that. But today, because we're talking about hiking, what's going to happen is the first aid stuff. And so that's why we really wanted to focus on that. But like I said, www.healthypetsnh.com. And then she posted the link for the Facebook page so that you guys can take a look at there and see other things. I'm posting other interesting factoids, but also the classes, other events that I'm doing. So if it's a canine fitness training workshop or if it's other stuff that I do, which I don't know if there's somebody else talking about it. So, the other classes that I offer, you can find right there. And also just links to other important information that I think is pertinent to the things that I offer.
Awesome.
So resources are there. And also, on my Facebook page, you can message me with any more questions. You can email me. I have my cell phone listed as well. You can text, you can call. Good. Be patient, but you can do all those forms. Okay.
Awesome. Well, Louise says, awesome info, thanks. And Stacy says, fabulous live episode. So thanks for the feedback, guys.
Yes,
That's
and thanks
really
for hanging
helpful.
in. It was a little longer than we expected,
but we couldn't have cut it short. You had too much fabulous information. So
yeah, I mean,
we had to share
if
it all.
only give you a little teaser, it's like that. Well, what was that for? Like, if you're going to run into the stuff, I want to know how to deal with it.
Well, we should mention too that you're going to post that PDF on your website, and we'll post a link with the replay so people can access it.
Yeah, what she's talking about at the PDF is that it's actually going to be a document that you can look at that talks about all 6 things we just addressed today. So we'll get that up there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the replay should be posted later today. And if you're interested in more, if you want more information on the dog walking club, you can go to our website, which is itavdog.club. And I'm going to put that in the notes section here in a second too. So again, if we didn't get to your question, feel free to post it and April will answer them on the replay. But thank you guys for joining us. I really appreciate it. And if you have any other topics or, April mentioned a number of things that she could talk about on a future episode, we could certainly do.
Absolutely.
If there's the need and there's the response. Yeah.
Yep, for sure.
Excellent. All right.
All right.
Well,
thanks, guys.
Thank you for joining us, guys. I have to get my microphone off so I can come
Change
to you.
hats.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.